Each Sunday night, I'd watch the practice with none of my friends. I'd turn the dial to ABC to see the creep of the week that Bobby Donald defends. But I'm out of practice.
With your hosts, Keith Varney.
Out of practice.
And Mike Indeglio.
Yeah, way back in high school, most every night, my mom watched QVC, so I missed the practice. There was no TiVo, what could I do? Wait 15 years, get fat, then stream it on Hulu. Out of practice.
Mike spent about 42 hours doing video transitions, and you're listening to this.
Out of practice.
Spring has sprung. Good days are here at last. I mean, for the most part. Maybe. Jury's out.
And welcome to the Out of Practice Podcast, a weekly podcast in which Mike and I discuss David E. Kelley's award-winning series, The Practice. This week we are up to season 6, episode 2. Although this is our third episode of the season because episode 1 was so damn long, which means the title of episode 2 is entirely appropriate. It is Killing Time, which you have been doing with us for years now. It is a beautiful spring day. How's it going, Mike?
It's great. I was just going to say it's 60 degrees outside, and you're in the basement, and I'm in the office, and we are not outside. Although I might open a window. I mean, if I might get crazy up in here and open a window.
Well, right directly, you can't see it because the camera's in the wrong direction, but directly above me is the window well of the basement, which actually has like a little, like one of those cutouts with I don't know, it's a window well, which I'm able to open the window and it has a cover so I can let Charlie go into it. So right now, Charlie is sitting out there watching the birds in the window well, safe. He can't get out, but he can watch the birds and go nuts. And so if you see a cat leap across the frame and land on me, knocking everything, that is why. That's where he is.
Now, Keith, I made a mention earlier this week that I was going to be following the rundown for the show today, but then I didn't ask you for it.
Oh, you're going to follow the rundown?
Yeah, I'd like to know where we're going, So we're going to have to really forecast where we're headed each time.
I mean, to be fair, we pretty much do it the same way every week, and we're in like episode 110 or so. But I will definitely. I'm going to give you. But
do you know that we were going to do more TV today?
I did because you told me.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I had a rough morning, I should say. I went to a birthday party yesterday. My brother-in-law turned 40. And I will mention we played Millennial Trivial Pursuit. Now, fans of the show will know that I am an educated human being, but I am not like smart by any stretch of the imagination.
And not a millennial.
Both of those things are accurate. But here's what we should say about the millennials.
Mm-hmm.
One of the fun things about Trivial Pursuit, generally, any of the editions I've played, is that it's challenging. It is a challenging game. Millennial Trivial Pursuit has dumbed it down so much. The questions are easy. The rules have changed to make it shorter and easier, which is not what you want going into Trivial Pursuit. You want a long, arduous game that is too long for its own good and too challenging. And
I mean, Trivial Pursuit is like, I don't really have a lot of friends, and the friends that I do have, I want to trap with me and not let them go for a long time, like Monopoly,
Yeah. So anyway, thumbs down to Millennial Trivial Pursuit. Thumbs down. But I made it by we, I mean me. I made a campfire for the kids that were over, and they all wanted to sit way too close, and I think I maybe gave myself like smoke inhalation poisoning or something, because I woke up this morning and my kidney hurt like hell. I don't know what that has to do with smoke inhalation, but my right kidney was just in so much pain. Now, it might have just been my back from collecting firewood. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. All I'm saying is I woke up doubled over in pain all effing morning. And
I was out making hauling firewood, and the children were all misbehaving, and now my kidney hurts. Oh,
my little nephew, though, was helping me. He's the only, all the kids, my brother's kids were over, and my sister's kids were there. And we were all appropriately distanced and masked. Not distanced, but masked. And the only one that would help me collect firewood, which is my favorite thing to do, is, kindling for the fire. Go and get sticks from the backyard, and he was hauling his little what do you call it? The thing you pull behind you, the wagon,
like a wagon.
Yeah. We were putting sticks in and everything, and then he got a couple ones that he's like, "These are too big, Uncle Mike. They're just too big." And I pulled out my Leatherman and I showed him the little saw, the wood saw, and I was like, "Okay, buddy, it's time to teach you to be a man." And he's there sawing the little wood with the Leatherman.
I teach the children with my pocket knife how to whittle wood.
God damn, it was cute. He's so cute. And his sister's so mean. I don't know. My sister got one of each.
They happen. Well, it's funny that you mention like a little fire, because yesterday we were able to sit outside for the first time in the backyard, and we have a little fire pit. It's not like dug in. It's one of those like metal thingies that we're so excited to get started doing it. And of course we ordering patio furniture because we have like literally nothing. We were sitting on a couple of metal folding chairs. Yeah. And so but we were sitting outside and just loving watching the sunset in our backyard, and realizing that as there's planes going overhead every 3 minutes, that we are now in Rahway, roughly equidistant to Newark as we were to LaGuardia in Astoria. So we used to sit on the roof in Astoria and watch the planes take off from LaGuardia, and now we're going to sit in our backyard and watch the planes take off from Newark.
That's funny, man. Yeah, we
But it's nice.
Go ahead.
It's not so loud that it's bothersome. I just get to look at planes all the time, like I'm 10.
We've switched from cat content to just old guy content. We were so excited because last week, or was the week before, it was like a really springy week, and we were like, F this, because one of our big parts of the move was to get some outdoor space, and we have this nice little patio deck,
beautiful,
that looks out. We just happened to get a private spot in the development here where we can like see some trees and stuff, some deer grazing, and some happy little deer, some happy little trees,
happy little deer, beautiful deer,
and
happy mistake.
We went to Lowe's. And we found some patio furniture, and we got some things. I bought a new Bluetooth speaker, and I like hung it up on the thing. And I was just sitting out there last weekend watching golf, sipping coffee, and like with the speakers and the twinkling. And I was like, I've become my father. It's so weird.
I can't believe he teed off with a 3-wood on a par 5. What is he doing?
I want to just a quick aside, and then we'll get into the show. Maybe. So, we had talked about I kind of went on a therapy journey with you listeners and you, Keith, about my dad these past few weeks or months, and it's been great. But I was mentioning that I had done that on the pod yesterday to my family to see if they were interested in watching it. And I had talked about how, I had pieced together kind of that last couple months, and I was sure that the majority of my memories were inconsistent at best and wrong at worst.
Right.
And Keith, it facilitated like maybe a 45-minute conversation with my brother and sister about that period of time that we have never had in my entire life. We've never sat down as a family and discussed it. We just never discussed it. And we did for the first time yesterday. And as predicted, I was wrong about a lot of things. Remember I said it was a long, arduous, like 3 to 7 days that my dad like languished at home and we just waited vigil by his side? It was 48 hours.
Really?
Yep, it happened in 2 days.
Are you sure that they're right?
No. But my brother-in-law passed on a really interesting article by Malcolm Gladwell about flashpoints and how really, really impact a lot of people in really impactful moments in their lives completely invent the situation. Like he has a memory of 9/11. Malcolm Gladwell's memory of 9/11 in his brain is not at all consistent with the truth.
Interesting.
Yeah. He's like, my neighbor came over and we did all this stuff, and the neighbor's like, I didn't even see you that day. It's interesting.
Wow.
Anyhow.
Well, I mean, we are organic, messy people as organic beings. On that note, hey bud,
Charlie.
let's have Charlie say hi.
Yes.
Charlie, you're live on the air, bud.
Crop
Isn't that
dusting.
exciting?
Crop dusting.
Don't fart. Yeah, well, you realize, ironic, we talk about you crop dusting because the last time you did this, I was talking about the death of my grandfather and talking about his life. And
Are we going there now?
we're going to go there now. Okay. So, so this weekend, sadly, it's hard to take this seriously with a cattail. Jump up. You can get in your window. But in all seriousness, we lost my grandmother this weekend, which was not unexpected. It was perhaps sooner than we expected, but also it's one of those things we were she was also 93 years old and had been in poor health for a long time. So that's a bummer, but I want to talk a little bit about her life as well. Her name was Jean Ragsdale Wolvington, and she was married to my grandfather. I think we actually showed this picture last time when my grandfather was in the Navy, looking all of 12. But that was them right when they first got married. She grew up in Kansas, out on the prairie, and before spending time in Colorado, and then spent most of her life adult life in Burlington. So she was a really kind and really woman. She was the VNA Volunteer of the Year. She was she really liked sewing, and she did a bunch of stuff like that. And so she spent many years teaching refugees how to sew, just sort of basic life skills, and did all of that. If you go to the next picture, was one of their first cars. And of course, this was back in the 30s or early 40s. So it's very conservative. And they were driving out in this car, and it broke down by the side of the road. And the battery did something. And my grandfather pulled out and opened up the hood, and the battery sprayed battery acid all over him.
Ugh.
And so he's like by the side of the highway, and he has to like tear off all of his clothes, like buck ass naked by the side of the highway. And he's like, Gene, get me clothes. And so, my grandmother goes into the suitcase and opens it up and finds that my grandfather's mother had sewed all of his underwear shut for the honeymoon. So that was fun. This is my grandmother and her 4 children. That's my mom, the eldest, on the right, holding Bob the baby, and Jim and Claudia. And they all moved on to do really cool, interesting, and successful things. The other thing I liked about my grandmother was what we called the grandma score in cards. And that was, we played a game called the Dumb Game, which I, for the life of me, don't know what it's actually called.
Right.
But literally every Saturday night of my entire childhood would involve, we'd go to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and we'd get Domino's pizza. We'd watch Hee Haw into watching Star Trek The Next Generation, which was on its first run, which the older of the boys there, Uncle Jim, was the guy who did all the sound effects for Star Trek The Next Generation.
That's cool.
And then we would play the Dumb Game, and she was famous. It was a game where you wanted to have the smallest score possible at the end of the game, and Grandma would always have like 500 some odd points, which was like a record. So forever that would be a Grandma score. And if we go to the next picture here, you'll see that was a picture that I took of my grandma when I was probably 8 or 9, and I got my first camera back in our old kitchen. And go to the next one, you'll see her with my grandfather. No, even better. I talked about she liked to sew.
Right.
And so she actually sewed this costume that I wore in my high school production of Kismet.
Oh, it's you. I was trying, when you sent me these and I was putting them together, I was like, what the heck is this about? I thought it was her in an amazing photograph from a summer stock in the 50s, but
No, that was me as the poet in Kismet in high school. And so she actually sewed that costume. She sewed a costume for my first lyric show, my Bobby Shafto and Babes in Toyland costume.
Amazing.
So she did a lot of fun stuff like that. And as I mentioned, she and my grandfather were married for almost 71 years. And there's next picture is a picture of the two of them, I believe.
Just a sec. Let me get back.
Unless I am wrong.
No, you're right.
Yeah, there they are.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was like their marriage and their loyalty to each other was really quite impressive.
How many years were they married?
71.
Wow.
I think so. I think that I know they celebrated their 70th, and it's one of those things. They died within 6 weeks of each other, and I get it. I mean, it's very sad, but they really did hold on for each other, and that was very special. And I will leave us with one last picture, my favorite picture of my grandmother.
Just a moment, as I have unfortunately.
All right. Well, while you stall, I'll say one last thing. One of my favorite things about my grandmother was that she liked to tell one story over and over again as if it were new every time about her owning a one-legged chicken as a child. And so one of the the rites of passage that you always did, you always had to pretend like the story about the one-legged chicken was the first time you'd heard it. But it was really
Can we hear
charming.
it? I feel like we need to hear it.
Well, that was basically it. The story was she had a one-legged chicken when she was a kid, and she was also a tremendous athlete in high school, and so would tell stories about that. So, yeah. So anyway, so this is a picture of her and me. That is me when I was, what am I, 2 or 3, and that is definitely how I will remember her. Lord knows what nonsense we were up to.
Well, sure looks like a woman who loved the hell out of you.
Yeah. No, she loved her family, and we spent a lot of time together. With every Saturday night, and we'd play bocce. She was a great skier. Would do that in her younger days, and we spent. I mean, it was with her and Vernon Barb Emerson, who I pointed out when talking about my grandfather. They were, that was my core family, and so we're very, very sorry to have lost them both. And certainly condolences to my mother and her siblings.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so sad time, but really happy to celebrate them both a little bit here.
I think as you get older, we've talked about it a bunch on the show. You start to redefine what legacy is, I suppose. And in your youth, you're sort of hyper focused on what have I achieved, what do I hope to continue to achieve, and it's very about you. And as I get older and we talk about these things on the show even, I realize that there's almost nothing better about there's almost no more beautiful legacy than just the simple fact that your family remembers the love that you gave. And it sounds like your grandparents will never be forgotten. That's
no,
sure.
And and I was thinking it's ironic for someone who doesn't have children, doesn't plan to. It's less what you leave behind as who you leave behind.
Yeah,
and I think about both of them and their kids. And everybody has their own complicated life and existence and experience, but they put out 4 kids who were all very successful in their own ways, and in a very varied way. But more than that, they're all good people. My mother and my uncles and my aunt, they're all good, interesting, interested, loving people. And however we all got there, that's really something to say. And they're all close. And that's also a lot to say. And so it's, I think that means a lot.
Absolutely.
And they, and I wouldn't be here without him. So anyway, on that note, let us move forward with the show and do a little segment about people contacting us, Mike, called
Filings and Subpoenas. Filings and Subpoenas. Filings and Subpoenas. Filings and Subpoenas.
Well, first off, if you would like to contact us, you can look on your screen right now and find it. You can email us at outofpracticepodcast@gmail.com or on Facebook and Instagram at outofpracticepodcast. You can do any and all of those things, or just leave a little note right below here on the YouTube video, as our moderator Phoenix Cage did last week. And last week we put out the episode on March 13th, which was our sort of personal anniversaries of COVID. And he said March 13th, 2020 was a memorable day for me as well. That was the day I developed a fever and found out that my cousin was very sick. She and her sons flew out from Vancouver for a family funeral where I saw her a week prior. She had to stay quarantined here for several weeks and eventually became the first person in Toledo diagnosed with COVID, which is how I found out that I had COVID. Many members of my family had it that month, but fortunately, after the first one, none of us had to be hospitalized. Yeah, I'm glad that everybody was safe. I had a very similar experience. I mean, we got it sort of immediately after as well because of Jillian's show, which we had talked about in the podcast at the time. But he said, as a germaphobe, it turned out to be a blessing because one terrifying week saved me from being terrified for the whole year, which I think speaks more to your mental health because we got it. We were still scared all year.
Yeah.
Phoenix also says, love the new look. I noticed it on the podcast thumbnail as well. It's like starting off the new season with a fresh coat of paint. And
we definitely agree.
To which I say thank you. I really enjoy coming up with new nonsense for us every season, even though it probably just confuses our listeners. And I'm trying to draw in new people, like might have clicked on it once, maybe give us a second chance, but I think it's probably just confusing. Meanwhile, founding sponsor Jorge Navoa says about last episode, which was the Ellison case. Sorry, but Mr. and Mrs. Ellison both need to go to prison. They named their daughter Allison Ellison. If ever the Massachusetts needed to bring back the death penalty, to which you valiantly defended me because we had not dropped part 2, because I had definitely brought that up in part 2, which should be in your feed last week. I know, I'm trying to. We're
so
recording.
Many tenses that got combined there.
We went into like a tense black hole there for a second.
And you will hear that in the future, in the past.
In the past. Coming up in the past, you will hear that episode. But speaking of founding sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new founding sponsor! Joining the heralded ranks of Jorge Navoa, Cloud Lover 69, Leanne Wrights, and Jennifer Massanova, we welcome new sponsor Kari Kuhn! We are so grateful. Thank you very, very much. A new friend who has very generously joined our group of founding sponsors. If you would like to join them, Mike will tell you how.
You can do so by clicking the show notes. You can leave a one-time donation or a recurring monthly contribution for as low as $4.99, which is very complicated. I don't know why they just don't make it $5, but it's the same difference.
But they have to give 5? They can't give like 1?
I think the lowest monthly contribution via Anchor is $5, or people are just generous. I don't know. To be honest, I haven't given it a lot of.
I don't know. Maybe Anchor is wildly overestimating us.
Yeah, potentially. But look, we've developed quite a war chest, which is why we can afford all of the bells and whistles you see and these like stupid string lights I've strung up on my instruments so that I am as cool as Pete in the basement. But should you decide,
we're having a LED light off.
should you decide, yeah, Amazon's like, guys, enough. Should you decide you don't want to contribute to the show financially, that's quite all right. But we do remind you that you can join the jury and just leave a rating review on Apple Podcasts. As Keith mentioned last week, somehow, some way, it actually is helpful. So
it makes a huge difference, and we very much appreciate it. Well, yeah. So again, thank you so much. I'm assuming it's Kari, not Carrie, but if I'm wrong, let us know. Dock our pay. I understand completely. Yeah. So thank you very much. Very exciting. And now it is time to hop back into the time machine.
no, should
Mike.
we do TV first?
Oh, okay. It is time to pick up your remotes and do a little segment we call... Ooh, you added little cutouts to the animation?
I've done it all, buddy.
Wow.
So I guess I'll go first is my guess, right?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything, so,
Okay.
talk about TV, dude.
Yeah, I will. We've been watching a couple of little things here. I don't know where I put them, which is making me a little nervous. Oh, yes!
There, you did it!
Yes. So it's Academy Award season, and so we have taken from just watching stupid television consistently. By the way, I still love RuPaul's Drag Race, and Keith, your boyfriend, is still going strong.
Is he really? Oh, fantastic.
Olivia
All right.
Lux, one of our
I'll have
fan
to
faves.
check it out.
Though I should use the she pronoun as we're discussing her drag character.
Her character, yes.
Yes. But we began our journey with a movie I've been hearing quite a bit about, a lot of buzz about. It's an Amazon film, so you can see it on your Amazon streaming service. If you have Prime, it's free for you. And it is called Sound of Metal, and it is Riz Ahmed, and it is a tour de force performance. And I think it's been spoiled, quote unquote, in the advertising. So
he's a drummer. I get it.
Yeah, the general plot is
Spoiler alert, he's a drummer.
A drummer who is in a band with his girlfriend, and they play loud music, and that might or might not be a contributing factor, but he is he's finding out that he is losing his hearing. And it is basically an exploration, a character study of a young man dealing with not just the loss of his hearing, but coping with that lifestyle, coping with the fallout of his career, of his relationship, a lot of things. And I have some thoughts on. It's interesting because it is a full film that is really hyper focused on one character. And so I feel a little like I really would love to get to know some of the other characters who give amazing performances a little bit more in depth. However, that's not the story we're telling. I understand that, but the performance here is really it's a beautiful movie, and there are some beautiful performances by some of the deaf cast. And Riz Ahmed learned ASL or a great deal of it. I think he said 7 months of intense study.
Interesting.
He learned a good amount of music, it appears. It is just a beautiful film, and it's shot on a respectable budget, and it's definitely a recommend. It is, there is some hope. There's a lot of despair. But what is really, really interesting, Keith, which is why I wanted to highlight it on this podcast, is that the sound design is really, really interesting because they make a lot of attempts to simulate for a hearing audience the experience of a person who is losing their hearing and then attempting to get it back through cochlear implants and through various different scenes throughout the film. They're simulating through audio recording and through different effects the feeling and the experience of a hearing person experiencing that of a deaf person. And it's
like an audio point of view shot.
Yes, which I don't know that I've ever really experienced before. And I think for the most part, it is very, very successful. And the other thing I really appreciate about it is that, look, any sort of life-changing flashpoint injury, loss of, however you want to. I don't want to be ableist about this, so I don't know the proper terminology to phrase what I'm saying, but they could have shot this movie as just a total dirge, right? Of this misery of losing your hearing. But what Riz Ahmed has said in many interviews, and I think the film does a fine job of representing, is that ASL in many ways is a language that transcends verbal language. It incorporates a much fuller and deeper way of communicating, more engaged, and the deaf community is not a disabled community, and I think they don't like to be viewed that way. And I think this film portrays that in a very beautiful way. So it's definitely a recommend for me. I don't know if it was on your radar, but
No, it's not. But it's interesting. An old nymph buddy of mine is a deaf composer.
Huh.
Who is a terrific composer and is completely deaf.
Wow,
which is really remarkable. So anyway, what's up, Jay? So yeah, cool.
So yeah, that's the Sound of Metal on Amazon streaming. Also, I think I've mentioned on the show, I've been checking out the Peacock original Punky Brewster. First, my general feelings on Peacock, they're they have a free tier, which is pretty awesome. I found that in the Hulu and some of the other like free tiers of these streaming services are just torture, because the level of commercials and the length of them and the repetition of them is just insanity. However, Peacock currently, we know it will change, has quite a lot of free offerings, and there's only about 30 seconds of commercials throughout the entire episodes. Now, Punky Brewster is nothing more than candy, nostalgia. It's Fuller House, but a little bit edgier, I guess you could say. But if you were a fan of the original, it's a nice little pastime. I will say what I do appreciate about it, and which is why I would say even give the pilot or the first 2 episodes just to watch, is that this is one of the benefits of these streaming services, is that they are free of some of the constraints of network television in the topics they can cover. Even though this is a candy-coated sugar television show, the original Punky Brewster, if you ever watched it, actually rode the line sometimes of some more edgy materials. And this attempts to be very inclusive. It's showing a blended family. It discusses an interesting conversation on marijuana use, some interesting conversations on gender fluidity. A lot of now, it does not go more than itsy bitsy skin deep about these things, but the acknowledgement by the writers that they're attempting to insert into young child programming, tween programming at best, some of these topics, I think is a good indication that there is a moderate voice, a moderate liberal voice that isn't just that's like total cancel culture and like, totally progressive and or totally like we have to have conservative family values. There's people speaking in the middle, which I think is good. So
and it's shifting the middle to a more inclusive place.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Which I think is important,
especially in the climate we find ourselves in. And then finally, I'd like to I'll put a link in the show notes. I think this is probably a little tiny to read, but there's a YouTube channel I've mentioned that I'm really getting into. It's called Defunct Land, and it's this guy who does a ton of content on the history of theme parks and theme attractions throughout the country. It's a lot of focus on Disney. But they also have a VR project, where they're recreating old rides in full virtual reality. So one they've released is the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride, and it's in full immersive 3D, and you actually go down into the ship and you do the whole ride in VR, and it's awesome.
Oh, fun.
But there's a sub-segment of his channel that is slowly growing that is called Defunct TV. And it is like 12 to 15 minute, 12 to 25 minute explorations and deep dives on old television shows. There's a whole thing on a lot of stuff on Jim Henson, a lot of stuff on Sesame and some other shows that used to watch, Pinwheel, some of the other kid programs we used to watch. The old, do you remember those really, looking back, we watched them as kids, but then as you watch it as an adult, it's really frightening. Those Pooh Corner and Dumbo shows, but they were live action with just guys in those big puppet costumes.
I didn't, because we didn't have cable growing up. And so we only had 2.5 channels, and we were barely allowed to watch those.
These were public access channels. Yeah. Anyway,
interesting.
I'll put a link in the show notes to this. Definitely, whether you're interested or even interested on the periphery, it's a cool exploration. I bet you'll find a couple that you'd like to watch. So this is a channel that I gave a subscribe, and I even hit that little bell icon. They don't need your subscription, trust me, but I'm sure they'd like to have it.
We'll take your subscription.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I think that's all I put on my. Yep, we're back to the beginning. So that's what I've got, Keith. Anything you've been watching that you'd like to highlight, or should we bail?
No, I mean I started the Justice League redo.
Oh, the Snyder Cut, the 4-hour jam.
Yeah,
Wow.
I started it. We can talk about it next week, but
okay.
That was interesting. The 4:3 aspect ratio threw me.
Yeah.
I may have cropped it.
Gave a zoomsy?
I might have given it a zoomsy because it was going to drive me nuts.
I'm not going to watch that.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. I thought this first one was so bad, and you can't. There's no way you can save it. So I'm out.
Well, it's not necessarily. I'm not watching it from the standpoint like, oh, now it's going to be good. I'm just fascinated by two such vastly different visions, and the very fact that this exists at all, that they invest another $70 million to do this. Like from the standpoint of a writer and a director, I find it fascinating.
Absolutely. The story of its inception is a much more interesting story to me than, in order to even appreciate the new cut, I'd have to remember the first one, and I've put it so far out of my cerebellum.
Well, I think because I don't really give much of a shit about the superhero movies. Like, I enjoy them. I really do enjoy them, and I watch them all, but I don't have a lot like personally invested as if it were like a Star Trek movie. Mm-hmm. Then I would be like, fuck you. You did what to the what? This I just don't care so much about. So I become more interested in the behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, let us move forward, hop back into the time machine, and talk about the week of September 30th, 2001, when this show aired. And it brings up the eternal question, Mike, what was going on?
This day in the basement.
There we go. You got your little...
Yeah, it was supposed to work. I don't know. I spent so much time programming this stuff. I was supposed to automate that, and I eventually...
It looks great. It looks great. There's only like 3 people who actually watch this, and 2 of them are us. Like, almost literally.
Oh, my God.
There's like you, me, and Phoenix in like a bar somewhere.
Yeah. Well.
All right. So September 30th, the year 2001. What were you up to?
Well, Keith, I was dreaming, and I'm going to tell you all about it any minute now. I was a few days.
Mike fights tech. He tries to keep talking anyway.
I was about to move to the Big Apple, baby.
Guys, you need to see this picture. Get on the YouTubes. Look at this picture of Mike and Deco with this Superman tattoo.
This is exactly a picture of me. Exactly, probably 2 weeks after I moved, but regardless, it's me at this time period. As a friend of mine used to say, man, you have a Bronx build, which was loaded with so much, and is not wrong. And
no, you did, yeah.
I'll say that
you were thicker back in the day.
Yes,
than
I was
you are
thicker.
Now.
And that goatee. We both had goatee phases that we probably should have rethought.
Definitely.
And I'll say this, Keith. I didn't know what to expect when I moved to New York, and it was a scary time. But my first night, I'll talk about it more next week when I actually moved to New York, about where I was living and the crap hole I was in. But my first night, I was in this dorm room type of situation, and my roommate at the time was having a party. I didn't know any of the people. And I just kind of like crawled up into my little bed and was, I guess I should have saved the story for next week, but whatever, we're here. And I crawled up into my little top bunk because there was only room for bunk beds because it was so tiny.
Right.
And his name was Richard Zoo, and he wasn't supposed to tell anyone because while we were in conservatory, you weren't supposed to be taking any auditions, let alone any gigs. And what he had done, unbeknownst to the school at the time, was auditioned for and secured a role in the Broadway production of Thoroughly Modern Millie. So he was going to school during the day and performing in Thoroughly Modern Millie in the evening. He was having a party.
Secretly?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And one of the cast members from that show, I'll leave for another time, was over at this party and some things were taking place. And they decided to all crash there, but there was no room. And so this very beautiful member of the cast crawled up into my bunk and was like, introduced herself. And she was like, hey, you mind if I sleep here? And I was like, no, I don't. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this will be okay. That was how I got ushered into the New York theatrical scene. I mean, nothing happened. Obviously, I slept like this and was, but
oh my God, I'm gonna get on Facebook and ask Harriet Harris how the night was.
No. Yeah, right. So me and Sutton have been friends ever since. So
you and Gavin?
Right. Anyway, so
wow,
I think
that is such a college experience.
It was really cool. Yeah.
The platonic bed share.
Mm-hmm. So let me. I think everything should be working now, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on to our next thing. Anyway.
You mean like what happened in my basement?
Oh God. Yes. Sorry, Keith.
You were so excited about having the 3/4 of the original cast of Thoroughly Modern Millie in your bed non-sexually. You forgot that I was also...
Oh, there it is. Now it worked. Oh, we got him.
Hey! Oh my God.
Next week when it all works
next week, we're going to get this. We're going to nail it next week. So what I was doing is I was beginning rehearsals for what was sort of the big event of the first half of my senior year at school. And that was, I was in rehearsals for the opera Transformations.
Whoa.
Which was a contemporary atonal opera by Conrad Souza, which was a retelling of the Grimm's fairy tales by Anne Sexton, which took place in an insane asylum, was the darkest thing you've ever seen in your life, and completely atonal the entire time. And I played a crazy person and Rumpelstiltskin. It was really this crazy experience. But I all of that makes it sound like it wasn't awesome, but it was super awesome. And I really enjoyed doing it. And as we move forward, get closer to the performances, I will fill you in with more stuff. I have photos from the production. My parents have a VHS of it. I don't have access to it. So, but in this, and I'm just teasing it. I may or may not do it, but in the next couple of weeks, I might sing a little phrase from it, which was there is things as difficult in music. I'm not sure there's anything more difficult than this insane atonal phrase that I had to learn and did so many times that now, 20 years later, I still remember it. And we will.
Yeah, I guess there's no other way but to insert it into your gray matter.
Oh my God! It'll be with me to my final days. But it was really cool. It was a very cool production.
That's awesome.
And it was neat to be doing something where the composer was still alive and so on and so forth. All right, we will talk more about that later. But now it is time to zoom out a little bit and talk about this day in some sort of a globe-shaped thing. Are you ready, Mike?
Yeah.
Such as
It's time for the Out of Practice Podcast's This Day in the World. The greatest hits, the biggest movies, headlines from Vermont, essential sports updates, and for some inexplicable reason, the weather from 20 years ago. Now back to Keith and Mike.
Well,
Keep on falling.
yes, look at that. Mike has created a new graphic, and we are, of course, hearing a cover of Fallen by Alicia Keys, which was the #1 hit this week. The top movie was Don't Say a Word, which took in $18 million. It was a Michael Douglas, Sean Bean, and Brittany Murphy sort of crime heisty kind of a film. The cover of the Burlington Free Press talked about the president pressuring the Taliban. So we were not far from beginning the war that's still going. 20 years later, the first of a couple of different wars we were going to start I was about to say as a result of 9/11. The first one was. Second one was a result of you were mean to my daddy and I want your oil. But that's a topic for another time. Scratching those 20-year-old wounds. Speaking of things that are 20-year-old that most people don't want to talk about, Phoenix, it's time for...
It's time for Sportsball.
The New York Football Giants beat the New Orleans Saints in the first game back at Giants Stadium after 9/11. Thunder and Lightning both scored in the second quarter before Kerry Collins put away the Saints with a 46-yard touchdown to Joe Jurevicius to cement the 21-13 win. Tony Bennett sang the national anthem in a ceremony honoring first responders. Meanwhile, the Eagles crushed the Cowboys 40-18. McNabb threw 3 touchdowns, including 2 to Chad Lewis. Oh. If I hadn't stumbled, I would have gotten there.
You almost got there.
Would have gotten there. Okay, and now, in the segment which we normally would do the weather, we're going to do another segment that involves a different time period and perhaps behavior not sanctioned by the law in a segment we call...
Back in Time.
Wow, look at that.
On October 31st, 2001, Ryan Ferguson and his friend Chuck Erickson, both 17-year-old high school students, attended a few Halloween parties and then continued to drink at a local bar in Columbia, Missouri. That same night, Keith Heathcote was found beaten and strangled to death during an attempted robbery in a parking lot not far from where Ferguson and Erickson had been partying. The night of the murder, Erickson had been under the influence of cocaine, Adderall, and alcohol, Keith, which caused him to black out. As the case drew attention from the local media, Erickson began to have lucid dreams about the murder, prompting him to question his actions on the night that it happened. He asked his friend Ferguson if they had any involvement in the murder, and Ferguson said, "No, absolutely, we were drinking at a party." In 2004, a local newspaper released a sketch of the suspect, and Erickson believed it resembled him. So after expressing his worries to a couple of friends, one alerted the police and he was taken into custody for questioning. During the interrogation, Erickson didn't know any of the details surrounding the murder, including what Holbert was strangled with, what he was wearing. But despite no evidence linking them to the crime and any apparent motive, Missouri prosecutor Kevin Crane charged Ferguson and Erickson with the murder. Erickson, that's the guy who had blacked out, agreed to a plea deal for a lighter sentence of 25 years in exchange for testimony against his friend Ferguson. At Ferguson's 2005 trial, Erickson took the stand and claimed that Ferguson had killed Heathcote during their attempt to rob him for money to buy more alcohol. Despite several inconsistencies in Erickson's testimony, Ferguson was found guilty of second-degree murder and robbery and sentenced to 40 years in prison.
Oh, shit.
In a 2012 public court hearing, Erickson admitted that he had committed perjury because Crane had pressured him into testifying against Ferguson. Erickson said that he was sure now that Ferguson was not guilty, and he had perjured himself with a combination story fed to him by the prosecution and his blacked out inventions. In November of 2013, a Missouri appeals court overturned Ferguson's conviction, and after spending nearly a decade in prison for a crime he didn't commit as he had just been at a party, he regained his freedom at the age of 29. Missouri will not retry the case. And at this time, it remains unsolved.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
So basically, Keith, that could be you and I,
The guilty conscience that he wasn't guilty.
but he still took a plea deal and sold his friend into prison for 40 years.
That's crazy.
But what I found interesting about that is, though, even though it was blatantly clear, apparently, by the way, thanks to crimemuseum.org for that story, even though there was plenty of inconsistencies and any good detectives would have known that that was not a case, they did a Helen McMurderer and our Judge Helen Dredd, and they were like, let's get this conviction that we can convince this guy he did anything.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, and I love I love your graphic there. Well,
Thanks,
done.
buddy. Right? I'm slowly but surely putting a little bit of effort into
Putting a little effort in
what we got
there.
going on.
It's so funny that you mention Judge Helen McDredd, because that's related to some was it a television show that we used to. I vaguely remember. I might have blacked out from a college party, but I vaguely remember we used to talk about some sort of a television show.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like our audience might be saying something like,
I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. And I'm not going to take this anymore.
It's time to talk about the damn episode.
this episode of the practice. That's what we talk about every week a little bit, and mostly about ourselves. It is season 6, episode 2 of the practice, Killing Time, or Killing Time. It's hard to say. Gonna find out. And it was written by David E. Kelly and Lucas Reiter, who last wrote on Poor Richard's Almanac, and directed.
That's when he bid it, right?
Yeah, that's when he bid it. And directed by Daniel Attias, who last directed The Case of Harlan Bassett. Another great episode.
Mm-hmm.
Which leaves us with only one important question, a question that we ask of a co-host who is going to
I got it now. I'm back on track now.
Okay. It's a segment we call
What is that supposed to mean?
What's your problem?
Is this what happens to women when you insert your penis?
What?
What does Mike think's gonna happen?
What if he would have drank the curdled milk? Then what would have happened?
Now, if you're playing at home, you know season 6 is the season of
Measured?
No.
Oh,
No.
wait. You're right. You changed
It is the season of extreme pitches or sexy pitches or big
like
pitches.
that.
Big pitches. It is the season of big pitches where you're going to pitch you pitch an episode to us, Mike.
Well, you'll recall at the end of last episode, we were which is like now it's our 3rd episode, but it's like after their 2nd episode. We really screwed up the timeline here.
So in the future, you will already have listened to this.
Yes, and you'll know that we got off for the murder of that guy, and it was because he was having a gay affair, and his wife actually did the murdering. And then she did a whole monologuing, you caught me monologuing with Ellenor at the end, and she was like, I did it. You can't catch me. Just like that, actually. That's a very...
It was a remarkable... Daryl Hammond, are you here?
Daryl and Ellenor, instead of just being like, you win some, you lose some, is like, I'ma get this B. So, in an incredible episode of The Practice, Ellenor decides she cannot abide by what has just transpired.
Okay.
It's one thing to lose, but it is another thing to be mocked and to be lied to and to be used as a pawn.
Interested.
Used as a pawn in a blatant murder escape. And so she decides to turn to her roommate and now ruthless murderer, Helen Gamble, to which they now break all bounds and rules and plot an incredible Rube Goldberg type trap in order to entrap awesome guest star actress whose name escapes me,
Virginia Madsen,
to confess and be tried for murder. But unfortunately, somehow it leads to now the death of her husband, other incredible actor,
Dylan Baker. Okay, so, all right. So Helen and Ellenor conspired to kill Keith. That sounds about right.
Yeah, not just conspire, but Rube Goldberg type.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Like a murder heist.
Yes, exactly.
They're heisting your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I like it. Well, if you're still listening, why? But now is your chance to hop over to your podcasting service of choice and listen to us watch The Practice, Season 6, Episode 2, Killing Time.
And we are back, baby.
We are indeed. Folks, we have gotten through Season 6, Episode 2, Killing Time, or Killing Time, depending on your interpretation. And just in case you missed it, we're going to do 2 segments starring our good friend Mike Indeglio, starting with our favorite recap.
Mike has 30 seconds to remember what just happened on the show.
Oh, baby. So that guy from Rudy's here, and he like murdered somebody, but then he didn't want to admit it. So, but guess what? He does like a thing. Morgan Freeman's himself, Shawshank himself right out of prison. Marsha's there, and she's like, yo, you can sue me, bitch. But too bad. My husband, he gay cheated, and he's going to stick in prison because he deserves it. And then lastly, Rebecca's like, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, you should stay your execution.
I think you just convicted Charles S. Dutton's character of murder, but he didn't actually do it.
Well, it's up for interpretation.
I think you missed the point of the episode.
Well, that would not shock anyone.
And speaking of missing the point, it is time for our new favorite segment entitled... This is truly glorious. Let's hear Mike's HaikOOpsy for this episode.
Marsha's suing us? A Rudy parole hearing? Mockler playing God?
Yes. Okay. Adding it with a question mark or ending it, I like it.
2 question marks. The first one, Marsha's suing us?
Wow. Very
And then a statement,
contemplative.
a Rudy parole hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Mockler playing God?
I like it. Good job.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm telling you, HaikOOpsies. I think it's going to be a good new segment. I think Phoenix is going to like it better than Sportsball.
Yeah, well, he's probably not wrong about that.
Hey, it's the best thing ever.
What? Yes, you're right. Yes, I'm sorry.
But not as good as everyone's favorite award show. That looks like this. I forgot words.
Podcast in unofficial, unsolicited, unfactual association with David E. Kelly Productions proudly present
Oopsie.
The Oopsies! Celebrating excellence in acting good, lawyering good, guesting good, and being Tom Brady. Not to mention, this is where we rate the episode and stuff. Now, here are your hosts, Keith and Mike.
What the hell are the Oopsies?
Well, they're a fake awards show that we do at the end of every episode that begins with
Most
Well, it seems to me that Eugene came in. He Eugened his Eugene, despite having, and it took some epic battles between 2 juggernauts of acting and of making their points. And
point making.
Got his client, friend, peer, paroled from a murder sentence without compromising his integrity. And I think that is a win-win, as we call it in the biz. And so I'm going to say Eugene Young is my most valuable lawyer, even though it wasn't his intention going in to let the guy not admit it. He did advise him to do so, but we got there in the end. We got where we were going, they say.
Well, I mean, he got the desired result, which was get his client out of, to get his client on parole. Obviously, the most important objective, and was tasked with the higher degree of difficulty due to his client's credibility. And he closed it good. I mean, I think most of the heavy lifting was done by Charles S. Dutton's character, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, Eugene. I mean, if I murder somebody, I want Eugene protecting me. If he fails, I still want him at the parole hearing. So congratulations, Eugene Young, with your MVL. Coming up next, everybody stretch. The dance might be longer than the deliberations, but here we go.
Already famous cause you've been on TV, getting a paycheck, or the first entry on your IMDb. Way to go, but you're the best guest actor. You are the best guest actor. You are the best guest actor on the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we all agree that Eugene and Steve Young would have been nothing. Steve Harris?
Steve Young, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers.
Owes all of his success to the one and only Charles Dutton.
Charles S. Dutton, indeed. I mean, I think it was you had it all ready to go. No, I mean, honestly, his performance was astounding.
Yeah.
And because, in the first couple of scenes with Eugene, obviously they're able to just like go at each other like lions. And he has the physicality and he has the power and the passion, but and like we know he can do that.
Yep.
And like it's riveting and amazing and I'd watch it forever. But it is sort of like, yeah, we get that. But what he showed in the parole hearing during his testimony was all of the vulnerability that he brings to it. And here's where it gets interesting, because it's not just showing vulnerability as opposed to being the lion. He showed vulnerability while being the lion. And so he didn't have that like, rah, 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 rah. Oh, I'm going to have this little moment. Now I'm going to single tear. Mm-hmm. He was able to bring all of that vulnerability with all of that passion. And that's really where you're just like, just playing with just the most exciting, it's a fireworks, really, because it's, you're playing opposite emotions that are happening at the same time. It's amazing. It's so good. It's a scene that I'm glad I watched a second time. Like anybody go back and watch it again. It's just like, that's where it's at, kids.
Look, I don't know where season 6 is headed, but I do know that even though it's early, it's episode 2, in fact, I think there's a chance we come back to this and think about it when we get to the season end oopsies about best guest star or best guest actor, because this was a powerful performance.
Yes, it really was. So congratulations, Charles S. Dutton, a man who does not need this award, but he's getting it anyway. Congratulations. I do not need your award, sir. Well, you're getting it. Coming up next.
You killed your podiatrist or blew the case, but you let a single tear run down your face. You're the best actor on the show.
Well, that didn't need a lot of deliberation, but this one might, because I think that we were gifted, thankfully, 2 incredible performances from cast members who haven't had a lot to do recently. Both Steve Harris and Lisa Gay Hamilton gave tour de force performances. Now, I feel like Steve had a little bit more to do as far as just the script itself. But damn if Lisa Gay didn't have every scene she was in was articulate, precise, intense when necessary, emotionally filled and wrought where necessary. Now, Eugene was at a 16 the whole time. Eugene. Steve was at a 16 the whole time. Yeah. But Lisa Gay really, man, that, and we got so much character insight into her through the performance as well. You know what I mean? Not just through the writing, but through the performance. It's so hard. I'm almost hoping we do a split ski. Look, I love Steve Harris. I love him. He wins this award so much. But I think I'm going to give the edge this week to Lisa Gay Hamilton, even though she has less in the script. I just think her performance. I flip-flop because Steve, we don't get the excellent guest performance we got this week if we don't have the Steve Harris bringing his A game to those scenes. So it's tough. I'm going to have you probably hope you argue the other way, but I'm giving the slightest of edges to Lisa Gay Hamilton.
Yeah. I feel like I should also backtrack and say Ron Silver was really good. Yes. He would have won in a lot of other cases. Anyway, back to this. You know, I'm with you on your first instinct. I think it's Lisa Gay Hamilton. Again, same caveat with Steve. I think he's a fucking rock star, and he was great in this episode. Always is, and it's amazing to see him go head to head with Dutton because like it's just riveting and electric. But I really liked, and I'm not one to like to criticize acting, but we had some guest acting here that wasn't great. Not from Charles S. Dutton, obviously. And you see, and I'm not even going to mention who it was, but you see an actor just working a little too hard, indicating a little too much, and like not trusting that we as an audience can follow what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. So like, I need to like do something with my hand so you can tell what I'm feeling, as if, because like and in the case of this, it wasn't that she wasn't doing it. She just didn't trust herself enough that we got it. Like, we get it. Mm-hmm. And what Lisa Gay Hamilton brings to it is both the ability to communicate all that she's going through and all of that she's thinking. And that character is very complex. So there's a lot of things going on there. But she trusts herself to communicate it and trust the audience. She doesn't need to do anything. Like you watch her at the very, very end, watch the announcement of the execution. She doesn't need to do anything. Mm-hmm. She just needs to didn't need to like, oh God, and like throw a chair or whatever. It's right here. She doesn't need to cry, doesn't need to move. We just see her thinking and feeling, and that is where the really good film acting in particular works. So my vote is enthusiastically for Lisa Gay Hamilton.
Okay.
So that's it. Congratulations, Lisa Gay Hamilton, on your oopsie. Another person who does not need our validation, but we're giving it anyway. But you know who does seem to be a bottomless pit of need for validation? Good friend.
The Tom Brady Award for being Tom Brady.
I mean, other than myself, of course.
Let's not forget last week's O-Face Tom Brady, which also was... the Easter egg, which I forgot to mention on air, was the stapler.
Right.
Welcoming, in our subtle way, welcoming Rod Livingston.
Well, that was the specific red swing line, too.
Yes, Ron Livingston to the Out of Practice podcast and to the practice proper. So thank you for that. But, Keith, in all of my HaikOOpsy, I've yet to get into the flow. I wasn't able to give my due consideration to the Tom Brady Award for being Tom Brady. And so that brings us to the rare occasion where, in fact, it only happened twice last season, where I will allow you to dictate the Tom Brady Award for being Tom Brady, and I will do the Photoshop.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my first thought I've already had to veto because we can't kill off Tom Brady again without going to jail.
But speaking of going to jail...
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. So we are, Okay, so we reference chicken soup for the soul.
Okay.
In this episode, and if you want to check your Easter egg, you might find something related to that. I'm gonna Tom Brady on the cover of his self-written self-help book.
Okay, Tom Brady on the cover of his self-help self-book.
I say that as I read so many of them myself, I could write my own.
Okay.
I have a picture.
All right.
I feel better now. Yeah, that wasn't good. This is we shouldn't switch, man. I wasn't ready.
I know.
I wasn't ready.
I was really hoping you would give me something like Shawshank Tom Brady, something along those lines, since we talked about it so much in the episode. But
no.
It is
I
what
want,
it is.
Because I want you to Photoshop a cover of a self-help book with Tom Brady. I think that'd be interesting.
Sure.
What's it going to look like? What's the topic? I want to know what the topic is.
Oh, that's a good point. It can be the title can be anything. It doesn't have to.
The title can be anything.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, that's a little bit more of creative license, so I'm excited about it. Okay, so
Yes.
self-help Tom Brady. I guess we can bring it down to that.
Self-help Tom Brady. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay, wins the Tom Brady Award for being Tom Brady this week.
Which brings us to...
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to announce how many spare tires this episode gets.
Yeah, I was wondering when you're going to self-help yourself into focus, bud.
How long have I been out of focus? Quite a while.
Since the last time you neurotically focused yourself?
Well, we got where we were going. So here's relatively in focus meat. I like this episode. We generally prefer the focused one episode wonders or one case wonders, but here we have 3 full cases. Although it's really 2, we're sort of just keeping the Keith Ellison case in the background, ready to just revisit it when we've run out of other shit to talk about. But it is still compelling, even that the wife might sue us, and that crazy senator is so happy with his poll numbers in prison that he seems to be giving us the same kind of arc that we had last season with our guest star who held on for 5 episodes. He's slowly going more crazy. So we'll see where that goes. I don't mind that that they kept it in the foreground here. The other 2 cases, like I said, showed a lot of client and lawyer conflict, which I thought was very interesting. And we had some moral quandaries. We learned a little bit about Rebecca and her religious beliefs without being told them, which is kind of cool. We got to see her do her incredible lawyering and investigating that she loves to do. And we got to see some great moral questions in the other case. We got to see, that awesome battle between your integrity and your freedom, which we talked about during the episode. If you didn't listen, you should go back and listen. So all the pieces were there. And then you add to that some incredible guest acting and then some incredible main cast acting. I don't know what else you could really... As Keith mentioned, there are some nits to pick. There was some really redundant beats here and there. But, when you're doing segmented television with commercials, sometimes you got to do that, right? Like sometimes that's just par for the course. So I'm not going to ding it too much. I think it's asking for an 8.5, but I'm going to ding it a little bit for those redundancies and for being just maybe a little too full. Too many ingredients for the tasty cake we're trying to make. I'm going to give it 8.44 spare tires.
8.44.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything like I always do. And I do think, my first complaint about this would be it feeling a little overstuffed. Mm-hmm. And, but I think about it, like the Charles S. Dutton story, I think, was told completely because they did not relitigate his case and just said, he's innocent, take our word for it, and this is about this other moral dilemma, that I don't think that needed to take up more time than it did. I think that was, so they had to fill out the episode somehow. And it's a weird criticism to say that they filled it out with the second case that was too interesting in the sense that, I would have liked to have seen that play out over an entire episode as the entire story, or even that could be an arc that goes on for a couple of episodes. I found that story so interesting. So I don't know, like, do I ding you for having too good of a story that I would have liked to see more of? I mean, we did see the beginning, middle, and end of that story. Like, I just found it interesting enough to take up more time, but it's not like there were missing beats or so, you know, I might actually have to just talk myself into not dinging it for having that many stories. I mean, you're right. The Dylan Baker, Virginia Madsen thing, that was just placeholding so that we can remember that story when it comes up next week or the week after. But I liked both of these stories, the main stories, both for the same reason. Again, I go gonzo for the show calling out injustice in somewhere in the system at one point or other, the injustice of the parole system, not just making somebody take responsibility for something they may have not done, but also pointing out the makeup of the parole board. They were all law enforcement or victim advocates. There was nobody there. There was no advocate for the parolee. There's the board is stacked against the parolee right from the very beginning. And I understand you should have law enforcement and victims advocates there, but it should be balanced with people also looking out for the parolee. So I liked them calling out that points of judgment. Now, the other case, the Ron Silver case, I thought was really interesting because it's about how far should we go in pragmatism? Because from Ron Silver's point of view, in case you missed it, he was a death row appeal lawyer who took on a bunch of cases, some of which he would defend vigorously and some of which he would tank to gain credibility. So, because he's not going and causing nonsense with people who didn't have a chance. So he's probably right that he might have helped one or two more of his clients with their appeals by sacrificing these other clients. So from a purely pragmatic standpoint, it's there. However, it becomes an injustice into itself by, it's like, how much injustice will we stomach for some other justice? And I think the show comes down on the line that he was wildly wrong, and I completely agree. But it's a really interesting and fascinating discussion. So I liked that, and I liked that his point of view was articulated coherently. He wasn't just some like crazy religious zealot who was whatever, trying to save souls. He was doing it for a specific reason, and that was to help other people. It's just that the result does not justify the means. So I don't know. I really liked it. And so I'm going to give this episode a 8.92.
All right.
I like this episode.
8.44, 8.92. Before we jump, we should talk about the Easter egg here. I got to be honest with you. It's even too small on my screen. So is that an indication that Virginia Madsen's going to stay with us for a while?
That's not Virginia Madsen. That is the author of Chicken Soup of the Soul. And
That's
the picture
funny.
from her book jacket.
That is very funny, actually.
So there it is. That is the Easter egg. And guys, we did it. We are through another episode of the Out of Practice podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to contact us, talk to us, let us know how you feel, you can email us at outofpracticepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Out of Practice Podcast. This episode of the Out of Practice Podcast is brought to you by generous donations from our donors. Go ahead and show that slide by Jorge Novoa, Cloud Lover 69, Leanne Wrights, Jennifer Masanova, and our new friend and founding sponsor, Kari Kuhn.
If you would like to join them, you can do so by leaving a one-time donation or a monthly contribution. You can find the links to do either of those things in our show notes, or you can go ahead and become a member of the jury. Leave us a rating review on Apple Podcasts or any of your podcast servicings of choice. and just let us know you did so, and we will welcome you to the jury.
Oh,
Ladies
yeah,
and
I screwed that
gentlemen.
up.
Yeah, that's
I screwed
okay.
that up.
That's
I
all
messed
right.
you up. That was
I'm
me.
there
That was
to
me.
cover your ass. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know, if Keith blacks out drunk as he's wont to do, and tries to cop a plea to get himself out of prison, you know what you should do? You should just fire some laser sounds directly at his face and at least be guilty of the crime that you're going to prison for 40 years for.
Wow, that was aggressive laser sounds.
Well, you know, I guess we've
Working out some aggression, Mike?
Hey, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next
Bye.
week.